Yes, we're live. So, hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. As you know, this is the place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to examine what is most factual and logically consistent. So, today, I have a couple of stories I'm going to be covering, but the most important one, which is going to be the last one we'll touch today, is Glenn versus John on Tucker Carlson's statement that this is not how white people fight. So there was an episode yesterday on the Glenn show where they talked about it, and I found the responses interesting. Both of them sort of had different opinions on what that meant or what that was, and so I thought I'd just react to it, and after that, open up the stream so other people can call in and we can talk. So before we go into that, when I started this channel, about the first debate I had here was, defending Glenn Lowry. That guy, black skin is amazing. I saw one of his videos where he called Glenn Lowry a coon, and Glenn Lowry being sort of a hero of mine, I said I was going to defend him. So we had that debate, and we took off from there. And from there, I've done a lot of videos on Glenn's content and all that. So I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan of him. So I know that a lot of people here came from the time that I was making content about Glenn. So you do understand, you do know that I respect that man a lot. But however, there are certain points there, people cannot agree 100% of the time. And this might just be one of the times where I disagree with Glenn and agree with John. But we'll get there. So the first story I want to cover is the one South Shore residents being outraged over the government giving preferential treatment to illegal migrants, right? So I'm just going to play the clip and then we'll take it from there. Now, I think this is a predominantly black neighborhood, and they were protesting the fact that illegals were coming in, they were giving preferential treatment, they were giving housing, they were giving all those other benefits, while residents themselves did not have access to that. So these are Democrats' policies, right? They want to just it's crazy, but I talked about Tucker yesterday, and these are some of the things that he talks about. But when he talks about it, it might seem as if it's it's a something racial, right? So now it's black people talking about it. That we don't want illegals here. So I think it's more like an American sentiment more than it is a racial sentiment more than. But there's another angle to the Tucker thing. Anyway, I'll get to that. So let's just play the video and take it from there.
It is insulting that you would consider. It is insulting that you would consider such action about a forgotten community that none of you live in.
Developing tonight, outbursts and outrage at a community meeting in South Shore over a housing plan for migrants.
The debate comes as the city deals with the crisis of where to put migrants bussed in from the border.
Elizabeth Matthews is live now with more. Elizabeth.
Corey and Don, contentious to say the least. This forum was a chance for city leaders to get input from the public about the old South Shore High School housing migrants. The city got their input. A packed house at the South Shore International College Prep High School. The crowd voicing their opinion, strongly opposing the addition of migrants in their community.
I am just outraged. I'm outraged, and I don't understand why our community was chosen.
City representatives saying the old South Shore High School would not be a shelter, but one of 3 respite centers for the migrants to temporarily sleep, eat, and take a shower, starting with about 250 people taking up the building's first floor. This is a way for the city to get the current 300 migrants out of the police stations. Questions were asked, but answers hard to hear, interrupted by the upset crowd. Before the meeting, a small protest of South Shore neighbors demanding the energy put into the migrant issue be put into their neighborhoods.
It is a slap in the face that we as citizens of the United States of America do not have the resources and support, but you're going to bring people who are not citizens here in our community, in our buildings that we pay taxes for, that you took away from us.
That is completely unacceptable. We are in a humanitarian crisis right now. The black people in Chicago are bleeding on the streets.
Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson had this to say about the migrant crisis.
We have a responsibility to make sure that families who are seeking love and support here in the city of Chicago and throughout the state of Illinois, that they are not just welcome, but they are serviced.
Okay. Yeah. So the mayor is saying families who are seeking love and support. Is that what migrants are looking for? They're looking for love and support. Such a idiots. Anyway, so is this the black version of the replacement theory? Migrants will not replace us. Mexicans will not replace us. Hispanics will not replace us. Is this the sort of the black version of it? I don't think so, but I think that the people are right to be that incensed that, people who are not citizens of a country are coming into the country and they're getting preferential treatment. They're getting housing, they are getting food, they are getting clothing, they are getting some of the other things that citizens themselves are not getting. It is a big problem. And this is the problem with Democrats' policies, right? You just want to open the borders and let everyone in, let everybody come in. And you're going to take care of them. They are doing this, they're going to take care of them. It's just like someone who has a family, he's not fed and clothed them properly, but he wants to be so charitable outside. I mean, charity begins at home. So if the residents of this city, if there are needs that they need to be taken care of, and those needs are unmet, those needs are being neglected, then it doesn't make any sense to bring in people from elsewhere. I think that borders should be controlled. I mean, it's not my country, but if it is my country, I don't think it should just be open for anyone to just come in. Nope, there should be a process for letting people in, and it shouldn't just be an open process where anybody can just walk in. So that's a problem. I think the residents of the South Shore are, they are in order to be enraged by this. Yeah, so that's the first story. The other story I want to talk about is Jordan Neely. Jordan Neely's. I know that the guy, the ex-Marine who killed him, has been charged. Right. I don't know what he's been charged with, whether it's murder or manslaughter. But there's another clip that came up. The narrative was that Jordan was being belligerent. He was being a threat to people in the train or in the bus, and that was what necessitated the action of this ex-Marine that led to the death of Jordan Neely. So might not give the full context, but at least it gives some context, because some people are defending the actions of this guy, saying, well, he was doing the public a service. He was doing public service, was protecting people from this guy who apparently was violent. So I'm going to play this 25-second clip, and you just judge for yourself if Jordan was being violent, if he was being threatening to anybody in this video.
I'm just a homeless man. I need to shelter and drink. Food, thirsty, and milk. TV, Popeye, thirsty and shelter. Milk, TV, and drink. And that's passion. Thirsty and milk. Food, hungry. That's what's going on. Shelter and drink. Thirsty and milk. Food, TV, Popeye. Thirsty and drink. TV, milk. Thirsty and food. Drink, hungry. I need to survive. Milk, shelter. Drink, hungry.
Okay, so that's the clip. So this guy was apparently so violent. He was so threatening that people were amused. They were sort of smirking or laughing at him, right? He clearly see how disheveled he is. He's clearly homeless. He probably has some mental health issues. And from that clip, maybe some other clip will come out to show the full context. Maybe he later goes on to attack people, but there is no evidence so far for that. And there is more evidence for the fact that he wasn't being violent, he wasn't being threatening to anyone, than there is evidence that he was being violent or threatening to anyone. But people are, they're so quick to jump to the conclusion that the intervention of that ex-Marine was warranted. They're so quick, without evidence, they are quick to jump to that conclusion. And it just, I don't know. I think it's crazy, right? People always want to believe what they want to believe. People always believe what they want to believe. So is if he was being threatened, I think it's okay for someone to actually intervene, right? But actions have consequences, just as Jordan's actions led to him being tackled. No, Daniel, the ex-marine, tackling and choking Jordan also has consequences of killing him. There are also consequences. You just don't get to walk away from something like that. So no. So the other story was is the one I'm going to be talking about next.
Over
Is
140 officers.
Donald Trump calling the cop who shot Ashley Babbitt a thug. Yeah. So
Over 140 officers were injured that day.
And a person named Ashley Babbitt was killed.
Yes.
You know what? She was killed, and she shouldn't have been killed. And that thug that killed her, there was no reason to shoot her. At blank range, cold blank range, they shot her.
So it's a very interesting choice of language that Trump is using here, calling the police officer a thug. That Now, most of the time when these police shootings occur, there's always back the blue. There are always people who are going to say that, oh, the cop feared for their lives. That's why they pulled their trigger. It just so happens that in the case of this black cop, he cannot use that excuse. He can't use the excuse that he feared for his life. That's why he pulled the trigger. He can't use the excuse that he was doing his job. No, somehow he's a thug. None of these other police officers, when they do something like this, none of them are referred to as thugs. But Trump is very comfortable to call this guy a thug. And he's trying to make the case that, oh, it was like like Tucker Carlson says, they were tourists. They were tourists. They were breaking in, and she was climbing through the window. She wasn't even going through the door. I'll play a short clip. If someone is breaking into my house through my window and I have a gun, I'm going to shoot them. So yes, that was a justified kill. So Trump trying to, and this is why I don't understand how he wasn't ever convicted for the mess of January 6th, because he instigated that, and his statement, so far is showing that he actually instigated that. And the reporter said 140 cops were injured, and he dismissed that. So it was so peaceful that cops got injured, that things got broken. So let me play the short clip of Ashley. Yep, very peaceful, tourists with bats and clubs breaking into the Capitol building. Very, very peaceful. And they said that, oh, he had a gun. They were definitely threatening at that point in time. So what would have happened if they had broken in and, that policeman or that cop feared for his life? He was doing his job. His job was to protect lives and property there. And these guys were being unruly. They were rioting. They were breaking things. So that clip I just showed, does that look peaceful? Does that look like tourists wanting to just walk through, like Tucker Carlson said, they just wanted to have, they were sightseeing. You come to a sightseeing with a club to break things. This is the power of narratives. Everybody wants to, paint the narratives the way they want it to be. The one side would say that the BLM riots were, was a summer of love. Like I was having some chat with someone on Twitter, and when anybody criticizes the January 6th riots, they will automatically call you a BLM supporter, as if those two things are mutually exclusive. As if if you criticize one, you have to support the other one. Like, as if it's not possible to say that both were, both were violent. As if it's not possible to denounce both. As if you have to make a choice. You have to choose between one. One is good, the other is bad. It doesn't make any sense. Both of them had aspects that were peaceful, and both had aspects that were violent. So it's not a question of one was good, the other was bad. Let me see if I can, read some comments. The cop, Anand says, this is not good. We need to abolish all prisons and cops. Boy, SKC said the cops let them in. Yeah, the cops let them in. And you've got to ask yourself, why did the cops let them in the first place? Why would the cops let an unruly gang of people trying to break into the Capitol. Why would they let them in the first place? Something doesn't seem right there. So when people are protesting, they're coming with clubs. You just open the door, let them come in. But that was not the only. The other part of the video where you see them fighting with the cops outside with the riot police, that was also the cops escorting them into buildings. It doesn't make any sense. There is no way to spin this to say that the cop who shot Ashley Babbitt was in the wrong. No, that was clearly a justified shot. But people are going to believe what they want to believe anyway. So, okay. Yep. So, the last one before I go straight to the main topic.
Don't give your kids your jobs. I'll repeat this. Stop giving your children adult jobs that you're supposed to be doing. Okay? Do not make your kids the stay-at-home nanny or the babysitter. Do not make your kids the cook or the maid unless you are paying them for their time. And make sure that they have a choice in doing so. Understand that. Your kids are not your babysitter. Your kids are not your cook, your maid, and they need to be paid and also asked. Sorry. I don't agree with forcing children to do something that you can't even do. So allow them to have the option to watch the sisters and brothers. Allow them to have the option of cooking or not, and also pay them. This will allow your child to have a high sense of value, like I am worth it. If I'm going to do anything, I want to be compensated or asked and given the choice. You said your mom made you babysit? Right. Kids aren't free labor. Exactly.
That is as delusional as it gets, right? So the kids they are not allowed to do any house chores. They're not allowed to do anything in the house. They're not allowed to help out, look after their siblings, right? Because that's child labor. They have to be paid for that. No, it's a family. Everybody has their roles to play. Everybody has responsibilities. Everybody contributes to the families, even if they're kids. So if you are mature enough, you can look after your siblings. You can do stuff around the house. You can cook. You can clean. And your parents don't have to pay you for that. It doesn't make any sense. Just more delusional shit. I don't think I have much to talk about that. So let me go back to the comments and see what. Yeah. So. SKC is saying Trump asked for additional police from Mayor Bowser and Pelosi. They refused. Why? So Trump is asking for more police, yet Trump is, castigating the actions of the police that were there. He wanted more. So what were the other police coming to do? If his request was acquiesced to, what were the other cops coming to do? They were coming to, do some more touristy things, to take the protesters around or the tourists around. Of course, they were coming there to protect lives and property. So why did Trump ask for more police if there were no threats from the rioters or from the tourists? Why would he be making such a call? It seems illogical to me. It seems inconsistent. And the cop that was there doing his bit, doing his job, Trump ended up calling him a thug. It doesn't make any sense. Stanley said Trump didn't ask for anything for 3 hours. Anand said there was not enough police in Capitol building in January 6th because they were overwhelmed. I mean, they were overwhelmed. There were thousands of protesters there. How many police was going to be able to take them, right? How many police was going to be able to protect? So it goes back to the question, what were they doing there on that day? Tucker Carlson says they were tourists, but the tourists came with bats and they came with all sorts of weapons, right? they were breaking in. I've never seen a tourist go to a museum where they just want to break in before they can see the things that they came to see. It doesn't make any sense. Really doesn't make any sense. But that's enough for those stories. So let's go straight to the main topic of today. Glenn Lowry and John Mikosa, right? So I thought today, how do I lose more subscribers? Because with the trajectory I've been going these days, it seems as if everybody or most people here know that Glenn Lowry is kind of my hero, right? I like the man. I've been listening to him for a very long time, and a lot of many of my earlier videos were on him, right? But there are always going to be differences, and there are always going to be places or occasions or times where I disagree with him. Most of the time I agree with him, but in this occasion I think I do disagree with him. So I'm going to play the video, and we're just going to react to it as it goes. So let me play it. Share screen. Yep. All right, good. Oh, it's muted.
My ears are ringing this morning because of your friend Tucker Carlson,
my friend,
and this thing that he said, this thing about this isn't how white men fight. And so he's, watching.
Why don't we tell people what we're talking about here? Tucker Carlson has been exposed. This is emails or texts at Fox News that were made available due to discovery in the Dominion voting machine libel case that they brought against Fox, which was settled for $750 million. And now there's some aftermath. John, you want to tell them exactly what you're talking about?
Well, there have been these tweets that we hadn't seen yet that apparently made Rupert Murdoch et al. Fire Carlson rather abruptly a week ago. And apparently one of them was that in one of his, not tweets, texts to one of the internal texts, and a long one, it's clear that he's reflecting, it's probably late at night, he sees a group of white men beating up on another white boy.
It's an Antifa person, isn't it? Is it January 6th that this is happening?
I think it was, and they are white. You could say in a very general way, skinheads. I doubt if that's what they were, but ones who would try to beat the hell out of an Antifa protester like that. And Carlson seems to be under the impression that I think it's safe to say it's a black way. He's not referring to Chinese people, but white people don't fight like that. There's a kind of.
Well, he didn't say black. He just said white don't fight like that.
Right, but there's a barbarity that you wouldn't expect of white people. Who would you expect it of? And I think it's safe to say that he's thinking of probably black and Latino gangsters.
So the question would be, how exactly do white people fight? Is there a particular way that white people fight? Is there a particular way that black people fight? So if white people don't fight like that, I mean, on face value, he wasn't referring to any other race. He wasn't referring to any other group. But as John rightly pointed out, there is some subtext to it. Given the cultural situation, who do most people associate such kind of violence to, such kind of behaviors to, such kind of group gagging on someone to beat them up? Black people. So in essence, he was saying that this is a black behavior. White people don't behave like this, right? Let's continue.
And so that's just not the white way. though. White people fight more politely. That's pretty, I am not one to walk around calling people racist because it's fun or out of some sense that my doing so improves society because we have to identify every little smudge of it that we find. But that's a pretty bigoted thing to say, to imply. I mean, it basically just, plays into the idea that there is a kind of violence that is for some reason, or it's in some sense inherent to, yes, Black people and maybe Latino people too. He's not referring to any other people. He doesn't mean that Jews, well, they're white, etc.
Well,
but he means brown.
Let me.
So I think I agree 100% with what John has stated here, but it's kind of interesting that John could not commit to the thought, could not fully commit to the thought that Tucker Carlson's statement might be racist, right? He stopped at it being bigoted, and I can live with that. People are bigoted all the time. There's all sorts of bigotry. There's ethnic bigotry. There's religious bigotry, and each and every one of us are sometimes afflicted with one form or the other of bigotry. So I can grant that, right? But it's interesting. It's possible for him to complete the thought to say that was actually racist, but he stopped. But at least he was able to, get to a point to say, well, that doesn't really sound right. That doesn't, to attribute a certain characteristics to, a group of people based on the color of the skin. That's pretty racist. But let's hear what Glenn has to say, what is rebuttal, because he wants to defend his friend Tucker Carlson. He wants to, do the steel man. But let's see how it goes.
Let me ask you this. So I'm gonna defend Tucker Carlson here.
Have fun.
I mean, he just got fired by Fox. The first thing I'd say is, isn't it interesting that we're learning about this particular message at this time? Who benefits? Well, Fox News obviously is in control of the information flow and has a problem of managing the blowback from firing its most popular host. So obviously you want to make them look bad. Secondly, there's this piling on. Your employer, the New York Times, did a major quote unquote expose of the white replacement theory, white replacement theory, conspiracy theory, racist character of Tucker Carlson's ratings busting program.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I watch, not religiously, but I watch on occasion. I tune in at 8 o'clock to hear what the monologue is going to be from Tucker.
So I think there's a point there I need to, respond to. So Glenn is saying that, all these things coming out is, Fox News is trying to manage the blowback from firing Tucker Carlson, and they're trying to paint him in a bad light by releasing these messages. But I think that's a secondary problem. The most important, the first problem was that, which he did not address, he just glossed over, was, what do you think about that statement itself? Because Fox News did not make Tucker Carlson make that statement. Fox News they didn't force him to make that statement. I think that before Glenn should have gone more into giving his explanation, he should have said what he felt about that statement that Tucker made itself. So he glossed over that and is going into the defense mode. But let's continue watching and see how he does that.
Tucker Carlson about a whole lot of range of issues, from Ukraine, where he's one of the only voices in major journalism saying, is this a good thing for us to be doing?
But no one, John here, this conversation isn't about the larger point of what Tucker Carlson is doing. It's about a very specific thing that he said, right? It's about a very specific thing that he said. So I don't understand how Glenn is saying, well, Tucker Carlson is important because he talks about all this other important stuff. Yeah, people can say good stuff all the time. But when they do say something that is off, we should call it out. We should not say because, he's been great in other areas, so we should let this go, we should let this slide. No. And I think that's what's happening here, and I don't think it's right. Let's continue.
One of the only people saying, who blew up that Nord Stream pipeline? Who really did blow it up? One of the only people saying, can you count the number of former CIA officials and former generals and whatnot who are coming on liberal cable news and feeding to the American people with a spoon the propaganda of the defense establishment in this country? Can you count them? He's one of the only people doing that. He had Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on his program to talk about vaccines. I know no one is supposed to credit Robert F. Kennedy Jr. When the kids riot in Chicago and they run like mobs down the middle of Michigan Avenue and Wabash Avenue and State Street, and they beat up random strangers with their fists flailing like that. The only place on national television that you're going to see any videos of these kids behaving in this way is on Tucker Carlson. Obviously, he's a racist. It's not.
Again, I think those points are secondary points, and those are irrelevant points, right? Those are irrelevant points. Yes, Tucker Carlson does all that. He says, but mostly because the opposition is in power. Those are majorly, democratic policies that he's criticizing. The war on Ukraine is being led by a Democrat right now. I'm sure if Trump was in power and Trump was supporting Ukraine, Tucker Carlson might be singing a very different tune right now. So it's not like he cares so much. It's still about the politics. It's still about the narrative. It's still about, being the opposition. That's what he's doing. So there isn't anything profound about he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. There's nothing profound about that. That doesn't make him automatically, irreproachable, that he's beyond reproach because of that. No, I think those are secondary. So Glenn, please address the point. Tucker Carlson said something which some might interpret as being racist and bigoted. Address that point instead of bringing in other elements that are not relevant to the conversation.
It's not that easy. I don't think you can dismiss Tucker Carlson. He has a huge audience. Who are those people? They're all racist. They turn in to get red meat. That is the bubble of Manhattan.
But that's a straw man, because no one is saying everybody who turns into watch Tucker Carlson is racist. I'm sure there are many racists there too. I can't say many, but I'm sure there are racists there watching him too. But it goes without saying that everybody who turns to watching Tucker Carlson is not a racist. You don't even need to say that. It's an irrelevant point.
And speaking, I ain't going there. Tucker Carlson is an important voice in American journalism. Yes, he's conservative, and yes, he's a provocateur. Yes, he is. But you can't read him out of the conversation by calling him a witch. And that's what people are doing. They're calling him a witch. Well, what about the border?
What about the border? What has the border got to do with the statement that Tucker Carlson made? So, guys, please let us remember that this conversation started with, John saying Tucker Carlson made a certain statement. This is not how white men fight. And that's the statement they are analyzing. And Glenn is bringing what about the border? Yeah, what about the border? How does that correlate with the conversation? How does that correlate with, trying to defend Tucker Carlson's statement? There is no correlation. This is just a whole lot of, padding.
He's the only person, not the only one, obviously not the only one, raising the question of whether we're going to allow the future of our country to be determined.
And, I get it. Tucker Carlson and Glenn are sort of friends. I mean, if Tucker was my friend, there's no way I'm going to come out on TV or on any public platform to be bashing him. I would not do that to a friend. I will not throw my friend under the bus, right? So I understand that he may be speaking sentimentally. However, I still do have a right to critique what he's saying, right? So maybe that is loyalty to his friend speaking, but, it doesn't mean we're going to excuse it because he's been loyal to his friend. No.
By a failure to enforce our own laws? That's a fair question. You don't have to be an anti-Mexican, anti-brown person to raise that question about our country. He's the only one saying that when a person shows up with a man with exaggerated breasts coming almost over his knees and is putting himself in front of children, is that what we actually want in our country? He's practically the only person who's saying that. So it's just too easy to put a hood on Tucker Carlson and shunt him off the stage without addressing any of the actual things that make him the most popular cable host broadcaster in the country. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that.
That answer was, most of it was irrelevant. Maybe there, he's got a point, right? You can't just dismiss Tucker Carlson. You can't just say he's a racist. You can't just, say he's not relevant. You can't just say he shouldn't say anything. But I like to be consistent on this point, which Glenn has, stylishly avoided by bringing in other elements where he can, be strong in his defense. On this point, he hasn't said anything, and it's kind of disappointing, right? That it's John that's been the balanced and the reasonable one, saying, there are nuances to this. You really aren't saying this, so let's go back and
So where the bubble is not supposed to go is that where Tucker Carlson gets the idea that kind of gang violence, that there's something black about it, and that is what he means. Where he gets that is not just out of the air. You're right. There are things that, and we don't need to see the video. You can just read about it. I personally don't watch many videos in that sense. But when you're talking about who is committing that kind of mayhem in Chicago, it's not that we're not seeing videos of white boys doing it somewhere else in town. It's black guys doing it. And there are the riots that you're always referring to that happened in 2020. Some of it was white people, but in terms of the breaking the windows and stealing the TV sets, it was our Omar who was doing it. And even now here in New York, it's been found that a small number of people are responsible for a vastly disproportionate amount of shoplifting. They totted it all up from, I believe, last year, and it's really it's a few hundred people. And
now, so John just made a very, very, very important point, right? So, this idea of 13% of the population committing 50% of the crime, which, you always hear conservatives or right wingers throw out. Now, John gave an interesting statistics that in New York City it was found out that only about a couple of hundred people, repeat offenders. These are the people doing the shoplifting. And you can extrapolate to other kinds of crimes, even to violent crimes, even to robberies. And it's mostly the same people, right? A small amount of people doing being repeat offenders. And then because they have a certain skin tone, you just attribute it to the group. Oh, black people are violent. Black people are, they're criminals. They're this. When it could just be a handful of people doing this. So even if black people commit 50% of the crime, it might just be two black men committing that much crime. But somehow it's black people.
And of course, none of the stories that I'm aware of said this. I kind of looked around, but there is a very strong brown tilt, and I would venture to say, from looking at names, black tilt to the people who are doing this. Some of the ringleaders, oddly enough, are East European, that they're layers of it. But in terms of who's running into Walgreens and stealing shampoo and razors and things, I shouldn't say razors, that ancient stereotype, but razor blades are expensive. I get it. If I were going to be a criminal, I would sell those out on the street. And so it's black men who are doing that. You cannot help seeing that as a sentient person. And yes, there are white people who commit crimes, but unfortunately in America's cities, in terms of homicides, for example, the number of white and Asian people who do it is absolutely infinitesimal, and black people do it a whole lot more than Latino. And he's basing it on that. But Glenn, I don't think it's as simple as that. The issue is whether or not he should therefore conclude that there is something. Well, no, let's just try this. He could know that ultimately the reason for that disproportion is something you might call structural. There's a history that makes these black men more likely to do this, and still say black people do it more often and black people need to do something about it. He could say that, in which case the case for his being a racist becomes thinner. But when he puts it that way, in that shorthanded way, and maybe that's because he was being casual and wasn't thinking about being heard, but his idea that there's a white way to fight, and then there's the way that black people do it, you can't help thinking, how many hair splittings is he doing? Isn't he really, especially if you look at all the other sorts of things he said, such as the replacement. These people are going to replace us. Now, he might formally know that there's a reason these people behave this way. But then again, we're splitting hairs, it seems to me. Those people are going to take over. We white people better start tanning our testicles and, reproducing more because we don't want the whole country to become them.
You're putting words in his mouth now, John. Excuse me. Come on. He never said
He
anything
said something
like
about tanning testicles. And the idea was to increase fertility. And so
I really don't understand. I don't understand Glenn's defense here, but because Tucker Carlson actually said something about tanning testicles, right? And Tucker Carlson has talked about the replacement theory a whole lot. He's talked about it. He's talked about protecting legacy Americans. And what exactly does it mean by legacy Americans? Is America not a country that was made up of immigrants, or is he talking about protecting the Native Americans, the Indians, the original owners of the land? Every other person there is somewhat of an immigrant. So when he's saying, wants to protect legacy Americans, I think what he means, he wants to maintain, the white majority in America. That is the way I see it, right? So I don't have an issue with him saying, we need to be very intentional about our borders and about immigration, right? You can't just let anyone come in. But when you bring it to when your justification for wanting that to happen is not territorial integrity, but to protect a demographic, because you don't want demographic change, then it brings into question whether you're not really racist, right? That comes into question. So if he was just saying, well, we need to protect our borders, I will understand that perfectly well. But when it comes to demographic, you're not going to recognize the demography of America in the next 50 years, next 100 years. Well, so what? So what? The people that are going to immigrate there, if they come in through the legal process, they will become Americans. So should they not be afforded the opportunities? Should they not be afforded the rights? When most people there already they are in fact 90% of the people there have an immigrant history. It's just the Native Americans, and they're infinitesimal. So
the question is, and this is a real question, should he be allowed to say these things on television? Many people say, oh, no, because that stirs up more virulent racist feelings. My question is always, if they were there to be stirred up, what is this idea that you don't say anything to stir it up, as opposed to thinking what people are thinking they're going to express in some way, or even if they're not expressing it, it's still there. The work is to change how people think, and frankly, for Black America to look inward and to do what we can, which is never going to be everything, to get better despite the unfortunate situation. It's both government and us. But you don't think that there's anything wrong with that sentiment of his, that Black men are violent and that Black men are about to replace us all? That doesn't rub you the wrong way at all?
Well, I don't know that Tucker Carlson thinks that. He might think it.
It doesn't matter whether he thinks that. You're not there to speculate what he thinks. You're there to respond to what he said, right? So the defense of you don't know whether he thinks that, there's no way for you to know what he thinks. What he thinks is up there in his head. But what he said is out there. People can interpret it. What is your interpretation of this? Glenn hasn't said anything about that.
If he did think it, I would disagree with him. Yes, that would rub me the wrong way.
But he did say it. Now that he said it, is it rubbing you the wrong way?
I think what's the claim about the replacement thing? The claim is the Democrats don't enforce the border because those are their voters coming over.
Yeah, Latinos are going to take over. Right?
Those are their voters 10 years down the road, which may or may not be true, but that's the theory. The Democrats don't enforce the border. That's certainly true. I mean, if you want to speculate about Tucker's motives, I suppose we could speculate about the motives of the people who don't enforce the border. So now we're in the same ballgame.
So this is back to a whataboutism. So what about the people who are letting, illegals come in? What about them? No. This is about Tucker Carlson. We can talk about the motives of the Democrats. I mean, that's clearly expressed already, that they want more people who are going to vote. And if the Republicans are very smart, I think that, more people coming in from other countries is actually a net positive for them, because most of those people are pretty damn conservative already. So if the Republican messaging actually makes sense and they're appealing to other demographics, I think immigration is a net positive for the Republican Party. So there has to be something else why this bothers them so much. If Democrats are bringing in people from third world countries, they're bringing in people from other countries, right? Those people are, they're going to lean more conservative. And if the Republicans play their game right, they're going to be having those voters on their side. But they're not saying that, so which means that there's something else going on here. And we might want to speculate it's about skin color. We might want to speculate it's about race.
Okay, he's a racist, or he's someone who's speculating adversely about the motives of the people who disagree with him about what to do on the border.
We already talked about the motives of the people who are bringing in the immigrants. What's Tucker's motive? What is his motive? His motive is not as simple as saying, protect the borders because, territorial integrity. His motives are these people are coming to replace us, and you don't have a problem with that.
So I this racist thing, it's not an argument. It's ad hominem in the extreme. It's saying bad person, bad person, bad person, when the whole currency of the realm here is not whether or not somebody is going to go to heaven.
Nah, that's not the point. The point is not bad person, bad person, bad person, right? I agree with Tucker on protecting the borders, but we may have different reasons for it. It's his reason that's on that question here. What are his reasons for wanting to say, you've got to put a stop to illegals coming in here? What are his reasons? And his reasons seem pretty bigoted. That's the point. It's not about saying, they're demonizing him, saying, he's a racist, he is this. It's about what he said. It's about what he's done. It's about his reasons for doing all this.
The currency of the realm here is whether or not their arguments are persuasive. So, should he be allowed to say innuendo, which is, that's not how white people fight, which is like saying, when I see that kind of melee going on, I'm inclined to think that it's black. So I'm surprised to hear that it's not white. No, of course, that's not an artful thing to say. If I were the editor-in-chief or the publisher of the Oregon, I wouldn't have him saying that on my platform.
Why?
Should he be allowed?
Why wouldn't Glenn allow Tucker to say such a thing in his platform? Why? So there has to be something wrong with what Tucker said for Glenn to say, I wouldn't allow that to be said on my platform. So why?
Allowed to say it? Of course he should be allowed to say it. I mean, there shouldn't be any law against saying it.
And there isn't any law against him saying anything he wants to say. There's no law barring him from saying anything. But freedom of speech doesn't guarantee freedom from consequences. So right.
But if he works for me and I control the copy that goes out on my platform, that's not what I would have said. I wouldn't have that said for the reasons that you allude to, which is that it's socially unproductive and it feeds into various stereotypes.
My ears are ringing this morning because of
So finally, Glenn comes to the point, right? He comes to the point to say, okay, so probably there was something problematic about what Tucker said, but it was such long-winded. It was such a long-winded answer. He could have started with that. I think what Tucker said, these are the issues, these are the problems I have with it. However, you can't just dismiss him as a racist on account of that. I think if he had brought that nuance to the conversation, it would have made more sense. But he was just going to defend his friend all through. Yeah. So let me take some comments. Let me put the link. Let me put the link in the video chat so you guys can call in. Yep. And I'll take some comments. Yep. Melinda, I can see you. Yeah, so the link is in the description. You guys can call in. I saw a comment from George. George said a lot of hot asses over nothing. So what do you mean by that? What do you mean there is a lot of hot asses over nothing, right? If you can clarify, I'd appreciate. No, but Democrats are stopping conservative sheriffs from doing their jobs now. Melinda said so. Really? Conservatives are stopping. Mm, I don't know. Newsom is a puppet, just like Biden. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Amnan says immigrants pay more taxes than multi-generational Americans. I don't know. I don't know if that is true. Probably is not. But the burden of taking care of immigrants, it's going to be on taxpayers until they find their footing. They're not just going to come and start and get jobs, well-paying jobs that they can contribute to meaningfully to the taxes. It's still going to be, still going to be on the people, on the taxpayers. So if the government cannot provide certain basic necessities for citizens, why should it be providing it for immigrants, right? For people who are not, um, you know. Yeah, hi Melinda, how you doing? It's been quite a while. We've seen you here. Yeah, so Stanley, if you can call in, Melinda, if you can call in, yeah, let's talk. What do you think about Glenn and John's response? Right? What do you think about the defenses that Glenn gave of Tucker Carlson? Do you think he was right? What about John? Do you think John was on point? I think John was on point. I thought John saw the situation for what it was, and I thought he had a much more nuanced take on the whole conversation. Right? It's it's okay for people to do bad things. I guess I'll say so, because no one is perfect. Tucker is there is no way that Tucker doesn't have some sort of bigotry. There is no way that I don't. I think I do. You know, everyone does. So, but when it does happen, for the fact that everyone doesn't make it right. When it does happen, but it's just recognizing that it does happen. But when it does happen, then it's okay to call it out, to say, no, this thing is not right. What this person is saying or what this person is doing is not right. But so call in. Let's just Anand says immigrants are overrepresenting among the elites, upper middle class, and rich. Okay, Stanley has arrived. Hey Stanley, how you doing? You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I had YouTube on. Oh, I have so much to say.
So let's hear you.
But I'm just going to let you ask questions because you know me, I'll rattle on. I
Okay.
actually took a couple notes. So,
So
um,
go ahead with your first thought.
um, you made a point about. Well, actually, you didn't. I think it was Glenn who made a point about Fox wanting to make Tucker look bad. You remember that one?
Yeah, I do.
That is totally wrong. Um, Glenn said it himself. These emails or texts or whatever they were came out during discovery. Fox didn't want its image tarnished by Tucker. That's why they released them as damage control. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that's why they settled. Now this is theory. I don't know if for sure, but the floating theory out there is part of why Fox settled was because they were going to take major damage from Tucker's emails. So they settled and let the dude go. There's also speculation that part of the settlement was getting rid of Tucker, and there was another guy, Bongino. I don't know if that was part of
Dan
it.
Bongino.
Yeah, Glenn is totally ignoring the news. Okay, he does not address any of that. It's like he is just in his own world. And I'm not going to be as kind as you are about John. I think John is problematic. Okay. Now, maybe John is more measured than I am. I will give him that. But bigoted, well, that's an understatement. This is America. I'm afraid that Tucker didn't mean white men don't fight like that. The implication is, well, who does? Who is Tucker always talking about, and conservatives and Fox News and all those people talking about violent crime in person, like saying which population does the violent crime. I really don't know where Glenn's head is on this, and I understand loyalties, but you know what? Um, it would be more admirable just to say that, hey, let's not do 20 minutes of sophistry. How about just say, hey, I'm going to stay loyal to my friend? That's like 15 seconds.
Yep.
We can move on. I'm not going to talk bad about him.
Yep.
You don't have to go through 20 minutes of sophistry just to look like a fool.
Yep.
And frankly, I put a comment in the chat. It is really weird to see an MIT PhD do whataboutism. A data guy doing whataboutism.
Yeah, I mean, I get your point. Like I said, if Tucker is my friend, I'm not going to throw him under the bus in public, right?
That's a 10-second,
Yeah,
less than 10
I'm not,
seconds.
even if I disagree with him, I'd be more inclined to talking to him face to face and telling him what I think about what he's done.
Well,
But
better
to
than
come out
that,
and
why even have a show about it? Tucker's not the only thing in the news. So I find it's so hypocritical.
yeah, unpopular is here, so unpopular. Jump right in.
Yeah, man, I feel like shit, like with the just like with the whole capital thing, or the conversation that they were speaking on, and like the border stuff. When you showed the clip of down there, I think South Shore High School, where they have immigrants sleeping in there, and I guess they was talking that they were trying to get the prior immigrants out, and now that they're moving new ones in. And I think I was also hearing about that they were moving some of these immigrants all the way up there to Chicago, because I think you showed a clip where the Chicago mayor was speaking.
Yep.
So it's just like they don't want them down there in Texas, so they're just shipping them all up. So it's just like when it comes to what Glenn and John were discussing, I feel like you guys were saying about Glenn defending Tucker, it's just like I get to the point where I get lost in what's going on, because it seems like there's three conversations that's going on, but like I got confused at the point, because it's just like you're okay with the border crisis and with Tucker, like at a federal level. Yeah, that's my point. At a federal level, it seems like, when it comes to Tucker working for Fox News, that is a national media company, right?
Yep.
So like there comes a federal constituency that comes into this, which leads to January 6th, because these people stormed the Capitol, which is one of the highest federal structures in the country. So it's just like a lot of this has to do with the economy on a federal level. And so all those things that Tucker was saying, I feel like John, I mean, him being the more composed type of guy, he's probably he says that one thing where he says something about tanning testicles, right? Which makes him kind of laugh, because he's like, this guy's completely ridiculous. Why are you defending him? And Glenn is probably like, he's Glenn is kind of enamored, right? because he has to defend his friend. And Glenn is just, it's crazy because I don't know. Tucker for a long time. I'm talking about. You could say like uh, I had got into it late for like a year or two. Tucker was saying a lot of things on Fox News, a lot of things that a lot of people really didn't sit and listen to. He was saying a hell of a lot. Like
Mm,
I know I missed a lot of it because he would be on it episonically, talking about stuff. And
mm.
Well,
yeah,
Tucker Carlson's really a very interesting person. Um, Honestly, I've been following Tucker Carlson since the early, I guess it was 2000s. He used to be on Crossfire with uh, Jim Braden. So, I mean, Tucker Carlson, when he was younger, was actually, yeah, he was conservative, but he was kind of humorous. He was looser. He was actually a guy you'd want to have a beer with. And, over, these, you know, um, 20 years, he has done quite a bit of a transformation. And I don't know whether it's performative. He's evolved, but I don't know whether it's um, performative or whether, he actually has evolved to a point to where he believes what he says. I don't know, but I do know. I used to tune in and to watch him back in his CNN days. So it's just kind of shocking to see, that arc.
So I think, when people, I think there is a formula for success in the kind of business that Tucker is into, right? Which is you have to be consistent. You just have to find your niche. You have to find a story and be consistent with that. Right? People want to hear certain things, right? Nuanced people don't really go anywhere. They don't really get anywhere, right? Because issues are complex. I mean, on this issue, I may be on the right on it. On this other issue, I might be on the left. I can be all over the place, and people don't like that inconsistency. So it's easy to be seduced into just let me find a position, whether or not I believe in these things 100%. I'm just going to stick to it and say the script. I get enough of people to agree with me. I mean, why do you think he's the highest rated show? Is it because everything he says is true? So I think because everything he says is consistent.
Well, I think everything he says is what people, his audience wants to hear.
Yeah.
But let me add a small thing, and this is where I'm personally confused. Tucker Carlson, he's independently wealthy. If he had never worked a day in his life, he would be okay. Um, I just kind of wonder what if it were me, and I know it's not me, obviously, but I don't know. Here's where I'm thinking that he actually thinks this. He's rich enough without Fox or any of these.
But it might
He's
not be
rich
about
enough.
money. It
He
might not
could
be
be
about
his.
money.
He could be his own man.
Stanley, I think it might not be about money. It might be about influence. It might be about power, right? And the platform that Fox is offering to him. It's a big platform. Now that he's gone fully independent, he wouldn't have gotten this much clout if it wasn't for Fox. So it might
Right.
just be seeing some other things instead of the money. So that's why I see it.
Yeah, but I mean, he's not going to have power at Twitter. Not the same kind of power, not the same kind of audience.
Well,
I
you
think
you
I think I think that is false. I think he will have look, this you got to understand like he's been on Fox doing this episonically, just airing shit out, right? Then some shift happens, right? And I think people didn't pay attention to the shift. What was the shift that happened that allowed Tucker Carlson to leave Fox News? What happened? What
His
was that?
racism became evident.
Well, damn, took him long enough.
Well, no,
Took him-
it didn't take him long enough. It was hidden long enough until it became a liability.
right. And now they're talking about he's finna have his own show on Twitter.
Well, I actually think it would have been more consistent to have gone to Truth Social, Trump's platform.
Whoa,
That's
whoa, whoa, whoa,
that's like
whoa.
just like
Well, what?
Trump and his two MAGA
Now,
followers there.
I'm thinking they couldn't afford Tucker.
Now,
But
Twitter is a bigger platform that's,
well, yeah, that's what I
sympathetic
mean.
to him.
Twitter could afford Tucker. Truth Social couldn't. And as a matter of fact, Truth Social is having some financial difficulties. They're going to wind up in some sort of court. One quick thing, you do know that Elon also offered Don Lemon a show,
Yeah, I do know that. Yeah.
which, hey, maybe it is a free speech. Maybe it
No,
is a
it's
free
all
speech
for the
platform.
optics. It's all for the optics. You don't know Elon Musk. It's all for the optics. He's going to play the, I mean, I'm the everybody guy,
Charles,
but
Charles, you're on
well,
Twitter.
and
You
also
you know Elon's.
And I don't know.
he's also
And I don't
is
know.
a capitalist.
Have
So
you thought
he-
have you
Yeah.
thought of having a show on Twitter?
no,
And
I
I don't know
haven't.
if you got
Okay.
Charles. I don't know if you have heard or
Don't
not.
miss the boat.
Charles, I don't know if you've heard or not, but just recently, probably maybe within the last 24 or 48 hours, Elon is fin to appoint a new CEO over Twitter. He is now
He's
Yeah,
in the next,
already done
yeah,
it.
yeah, he's in the next stages of progressing Twitter to what he wants it to be.
and people on Twitter are mad. I mean, you can't satisfy them. You really there's literally nothing Elon Musk could have done that would. Now they are calling her a woke liberal, a what have you, right? A
A non
WEF shield and the rest. That's what they're calling her. And some guys are saying, well, it was fun while it lasted. I'm going to be out of here. It's crazy.
And then Trump is on CNN doing, I don't know, what was that supposed to be called again? Our interview, a seminar or something. He's on CNN just the other day. We haven't heard anything from him. Just a month ago, he was supposedly going through arraignment, and he was sitting inside of a New York court. But then a few weeks later, he's on CNN, free as a bird. What's going on? you know.
So, well, I think there is no way the platform is not going to have bias either way, one way or the other. It's impossible. It's literally impossible, right? Also, given the dynamics of the US, where everything is stratified, with liberals and conservatives. I was having a conversation today on Twitter, and I was saying that the idea of having a judiciary where some judges are liberal and some are conservative is a terrible, 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 terrible idea. I mean, why should the judiciary be partisan? Why should there be why are they not interpreting the law based on how it is written? Why should their leanings, their partisan leanings influence how the laws are being interpreted? I mean, take Roe v. Wade, for example. Why should it's like, well, it's a plutocracy anyway, because some people are
Okay,
complaining now,
well,
like,
you have to understand that the Supreme Court from the Supreme Court from the very beginning, since Marbury versus Madison, it has never not been political. Okay, the first Chief Justice, John Marshall, was a cousin of Thomas Jefferson. Marshall hated Thomas Jefferson. So it's the Supreme Court not being political. That's a fantasy that we have told ourselves for 200 years.
but it's not a fantasy, because nobody actually believes
No,
it's
it's
not
literally
political.
a fantasy.
Does anyone believe it's not
why do you
political?
think we care about how many conservatives versus liberals are on the court?
Because people know it's political and they want to have their political representatives
Yes.
there in the courts. So
Right.
it's not,
Therefore, it's political.
yeah,
Roe
it's
v.
political.
Wade is political.
Yeah.
In politics, your way of thinking about, life versus or pro-life versus pro-abortion, it's pure politics. Well, there's religion mixed in there too, but um, America fools itself if it thinks that objectivity is like some weird, like American trait. Americans are about the least objective people on earth. We are not a data driven country.
Yep, yep. So I for the Roe v. Wade, I won't complain because I actually like it. I like the fact that abortion was overturned. I want to see it to
Well, it wasn't
completely
overturned. Well, see,
okay,
it
return to the
wasn't
states, right?
overturned. It
Return to the
was,
states.
yes. So
Good, cool.
it still
It's no longer
exists.
it's
But
no
the
longer a
problem,
federal
the
protected
problem
by
with
federal law.
what they did, some things should be federalized, some things should be standardized. And all they really did was create turmoil. And at this stage of the game, conservatives, even in conservative states like Kansas, um, Kansas had um, some sort of they did a referendum on how abortion should be handled. The conservatives lost. In some ways, I think the Supreme Court did pro abortion people a huge favor.
Mm.
If they had kept Roe versus Wade, it would have been over for a decade or more. Now they pushed it back to the states, and it is all of a sudden Republicans are losing elections over it. 2020, a major reason why, you know, um, Congress, between Democrats and Republicans in the House of Representatives, 5 votes.
Right.
A major portion was because of Dobbs. A major reason was Dobbs. So I think the Supreme Court, for all their politics, they did a great job. They just kept a hot button issue hot. Be right back.
Yeah, some popular. Go ahead.
Right. And to add on to what Stanley was saying, um, when it comes to the economy and the commerce and the exchange, the medium of exchange and whatnot, with that leading back to Congress and the Senate and the Capitol, all the federal constituency, right? Because that's how America works. That regardless, that's how it's gonna always work. So when it goes back to that, and he's talking about Roe v. Wade, right?
Yep.
In the midst of everything else that's going on, with that being a Supreme Court ruling, it's just like when we talk about conservatives and liberals and stuff like that, it's just like I feel like when people start talking about the left, that's what Roe v. Wade was. That became a heavy topic. It stopped the country, right? It was like COVID initially. I mean, COVID was way heavier, way heavier, but the Roe v. Wade thing definitely stopped all press. Definitely, it stopped all press, and it's left leaning, right? It's kind of like a feminist agenda. It's a left leaning liberal agenda, right? Libertarian minded agenda. It's all of the left to me. And it's just like why does that come about? I don't know. And I feel like, to go back to discussion that we were having, it's all about like the reallocation of I don't even know how to say it, like the reallocation of like what people tend to put their attention towards, right? So sometimes I wonder, how does, not to move outside of the topic, but how does the Roe v. Wade thing come about in such turmoil times? How does it just spring out about. You know what I'm saying? Like on a Supreme Court level ruling, like with everything amiss going on, Roe v. Wade just pokes his head out. Boom. And everybody's talking about it. And it becomes part of the narrative. It becomes part of the narrative.
Roe v. Wade pokes its head out and they abort it. Sorry, I couldn't help it. Hey, Melinda, could you? Melinda made a point, Charles, about abortion is money.
Yep.
I'm not sure I understand that point. Could she expand on it, please?
Yeah, please, Melinda. So please expand on this point so we can understand you better. But before she expands on that, Stanley, you said you made some notes. So what other points were you going to bring up?
I think we pretty much covered it. Let's see. Never seen so much. Well, I made the point about whataboutism. The point about essentially Glenn saying cut Tucker slack because he's important. To me, that's tantamount to saying that he is indispensable. Okay, and no one is indispensable. I mean, if a person is so bad that they are the most popular host with the highest rated cable show and he still gets fired, apparently he's not indispensable. And apparently he's not that important. So it's just weird that Glenn makes that point. It's obvious he's not that important if he was fired.
No, I think even if it's that important, right? Companies are going to weigh, they're going to weigh their options.
Right.
So
he wasn't important enough for Fox to keep. He was costing them billion, money.
Yes, it was costing them money, but it doesn't mean that he was not important, right? Because if he's able to draw in that much people, it means that there's something he's saying that's resonating with a lot of people.
He before this Dominion suit, he'd lost advertising. He was costing them money. He was not so important that advertisers were going to go, hey, Tucker's so important, we don't care what he says. We're going to keep investing or running ads on the show.
He had the audience. What isn't it the audience that advertisers are looking for? He had the audience.
But see, that's the problem. Popularity equals importance.
I didn't say important.
Well, no. I'm not talking about you. It seems to be Glenn's point. And I'm just shocked.
Glenn is saying that there are certain important things that most people are not talking about that Tucker talks about, right? That there are pressing issues.
That's not true.
He mentioned things like the border. He mentioned things like,
which conservative Trump talked about the border?
So Trump is not in media.
Tucker was not the only voice talking about the border and other COVID, other issues. He wasn't a lone voice in the forest. Tucker, even on issues that a person like Glenn cares about, he wasn't the only one talking about it. He was the only person Glenn was listening to. So maybe now Glenn might listen to some other people besides his one white friend.
So Melinda has said something. She wrote again. She said, yes, and the left really does not even left does not care about the health care of women besides Planned Parenthood losing money. So,
you know what? I'll just leave it at that. I'm assuming that's her opinion. I disagree with her opinion. I don't think the right does either. If the left doesn't, the right certainly doesn't.
Yeah, but why does it have to be? How about
that 10-year-old? How about that? What was it? A 10-year-old Indiana girl who had to go to another state. So I'm not sure that conservatives care much more.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be a comparison, right? It doesn't have to be.
Well, she brought up the left, and I disagree. I think the left cares no more than the right.
Well, that's fair. Unpopular. Jump right in. We'll soon end the stream because it's late.
Okay.
Oh, you're bored.
Yeah, I was looking at your other video when you guys were talking about capitalism and communism, right?
Yep.
And I feel like that plays a part in this because when we start talking about, like I was saying earlier, about this federal constituency, right? You don't know where these people are putting their money. You don't know where they're putting their capital. Let's go back. January 6th was a bunch of conservatives, right? A bunch of people leaning right that wanted to storm the Capitol because of however they felt, right? With their resources, their backpacks, whatever they had on them, their flags, the shaman dude and stuff like this. All these people, right, with these different personalities that wanted to storm the Capitol for whatever reasons, just to make a point, right? And then you think about all the liberals in the background supporting them that nobody wants to talk about, right? The liberals, they're eating it up, you know, like Tucker. We look at Tucker like he's not a liberal. We look at Tucker like he's just on the look. Let's say he is of the right, right? But he doesn't. Maybe we using all these definitions like a conservative liberal, right? You know, and he's talking about all these things through Fox, and he's saying he's like, yeah, we're storming, yeah, the American people are storming the Capitol. America is in a decline right now. He's speaking so directly, like in the manner which he is speaking, he's talking ahead of you. It's like every word that he is saying, it's not like how we're talking right now. It's like he's speaking in the present moment, but at the same time talking ahead of you. So it's just like every time he's on Fox News, it's like it's like listening to somebody speak, but they're speaking in such a manner where the conversation isn't going anywhere. He's speaking directly to what is happening at that very moment. He has this stuff planned, and he's been doing that for so long. Like, you talk about Glenn and John that literally will sit up and talk about the same things, right? On and on. It's the same rhetoric. They're about, and he brings people to his show, right? Glenn brings people on the show. He talks to them about certain things, all type of guests. He does this all the time, right? And John is like his main man. He wants John to come through and they'll reconvene. But with this particular topic, it's just like, man, like you imagine like the American people sitting back from afar and trying to analyze this. And it's just like, wow, Trump for the last 4 years did all that damage, and we're still talking about him. They've brought up so many charges against him. He's back in the news on CNN talking again, and it's just like man, like you imagine these people having this, like they tried to bring up those charges about him. They at first they were saying this early on too about Trump, right? This is like 2 years in when they was trying to get like his financial reports, his tax reports, right? They're like, Trump, what's going on, bro? Because that's his father's company, right? And then he's president, right? So you can't say anything about him. Because right, like when you're president, right, you're not supposed to speak against the president. That's like kind of like a law, right? No, don't do that. Don't speak against him. Don't say shit about him.
Not since like the early 1800s, like during the not since the early 1800s. The Alien and Sedition Act was thrown out centuries ago.
Yep. So I think this would be a good place for us to draw this show to a close. Thank you, Stanley, for coming on. Thank you, Unpopular, Melinda, Anand, Joel, and every other person that came around. Thank you guys very much. And I'll catch you in another live stream. So it
all
will
right,
be
take it easy.
now. Yeah. Bye.